Three.
Hello, Power Up with Pride 2024! I hope you're all excited for our wonderful pre-show. I'm SchalaKitty. I know you're probably not used to seeing me with like my actual face, but it's really, really exciting to be here. We're here with the CEO of True Colors United. So kind as to give us a live interview right here at the start of our little pre-show ahead of the marathon starting tomorrow. Much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we are very excited to have you. I know our wonderful tech will be adjusting the music volume in just a moment to make it a little easier for everyone to hear us. But yeah, so for the last few events, we've been sort of reaching out to different LGBTQ charities to find different partners to work with. When we were looking into who to work with for this event, we wanted to definitely work with a charity that had a nice wide reach in our LGBTQ community, and the mission of True Colors United really resonated with the staff. So for those of us who out there, who are our wonderful audience who maybe might not know about your group, could you just tell us a little bit about True Colors United to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So True Colors United is an international organization, primarily working in the US, but increasingly sort of we have a presence elsewhere. We're focused pretty exclusively on housing justice for LGBTQ plus young people. And so we look at that through a handful of lenses, right? And sort of like a handful of objectives here, right? We're talking really directly about ending LGBTQ plus youth homelessness, but this is also sort of where, like some of the how is also part of the mission. So it's about ending LGBTQ youth homelessness. That's what we're focused on, but we really specifically are focused on it through this like lens of like doing that by building the power of young people who have lived experience of homelessness, and then supporting them as they drive that change themselves, as they advocate for different policies and laws, right? Or changes to systems like social safety net systems, like the homelessness system or the voucher system for housing support or whatever it might be. So that's really, that's our focus. That's what we work on. We were co-founded by Cindy Lauper, Gregory Lewis, and Lisa Barbaras in 2010, I believe. So we're not a brand new organization, but certainly we go back at this point. And I'm the second CEO we've had. So I started in this job just over 2 years ago. When our founder, Gregory Lewis, departed. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit more about like your broader work and advocacy as well?
Me as a person, or at True Colors specifically?
A little bit about you, and then we'll kind of go back
Sure.
to the organization.
Yeah, so I came into this work. I came into my position at True Colors United, but really sort of this like national housing justice work from a background of really specifically doing advocacy and systems change work around trans rights and trans liberation in Louisiana. So really initially sort of like many years ago now, when I started doing activism, it was all around what it looked like for us to be trying to advance sort of the core human rights of self-determination, self-expression for trans Louisianans. I'm from New Orleans. Louisiana is a place that's really important to me. And so, I come to the work of True Colors United with this like pretty specific background of doing state work in a place where it's hard to do state work. And so that's where a lot of my like a lot of my values live in terms of like the direction that I'm hoping the LGBTQ movement drives nationally. And that's where I think right now we're seeing some of the biggest need.
Oh.
Um, before sort of like in the mix of all of this, right? I got into kind of a role as a lobbyist.
Mhm.
And so for some time, I was doing sort of direct lobbying work in Louisiana, and then also served as sort of the contract lobbyist, consultant lobbyist for National Center for Transgender Equality before I moved over here to start as their public policy director at True Colors United in 2019. So that was a few years ago too
Mhm.
now. But that's sort of my background and what a lot of my work has been around.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, to carry forward a question, we did ask our community if they had any questions earlier today. I
Awesome.
really like this one, which comes from to us from Fion, who asks, "What work has True Colors done that you are the most proud of, and are there any big initiatives coming up that we should be excited about supporting?"
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good question. Okay.
Hmm.
I might need you to repeat part two for me. I'm gonna
That's
start.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm the most proud of is that, you know, in the sort of 2016 through 2019 Trump administration era,
Hmm.
we saw consistently just, the 8 years leading up to that under President Obama, there were a ton of federal protections put into place for
Hmm.
LGBTQ people across every sort of like area of government, right?
Hmm.
Department of Education, Department of Labor, Civil Rights Commission, um, Health and Human Services, which includes like all of our healthcare, but also things like substance use treatment, also things like elder care, right? Child care, food assistance, which is in the Department of Agriculture, right? So all
Hmm.
of these things, we saw this sort of like, you know, really like purposeful sort of attempt to make those protections as comprehensive as could be over the course of those 8 years before Trump came into office. What we saw when the administration transitioned was that, from pretty much day one, the Trump administration was set on rolling back every single one of those, right?
Hmm.
Just wanted them all gone. To the extent that like when the election was decided in 2016, I knew this was before I joined this team, but I know one of the things that they did straight away was download and save into like the Wayback Machine every federal government page on the internet that mentioned LGBTQ people because they knew that that was all going to be coming down. So like that's just to give a taste of like how, straight away we knew it was going to be.
Hmm.
Um, this the sad thing is that what we saw over 4 years was that that administration was actually very successful in rolling back these policies, and so we saw them very, start to finish get through new sort of like proposed regulations that just replaced protective regulations with ones that didn't have protections in them anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but there was one really big exception, and that was the HUD equal access rule. So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development
Hmm.
had issued protections for LGBTQ people broadly in accessing homelessness services, but also federally insured mortgages, right? So that's like your FHA loan for first-time home buyers. They had issued those protections in, oh God, 2013, I believe.
Hmm.
And then they updated them in 2016 to really, I think, dig into what does it actually mean to protect trans people from discrimination in those settings, right? And to ensure that shelters that receive federal funding essentially, couldn't force trans people to um, to accept accommodations that were segregated, that put them away from everyone else, right? That isolated them, or that were not in alignment with either their gender identity or where they identified they would feel safest in the context of like gender segregated spaces.
Hmm.
Um, and when the Trump administration decided to propose their anti-trans shelter rule, which would have rolled back all of those protections, we launched a campaign to get public comments in on that proposal. We were able actually to secure what at the time was and may still be, I'm not actually sure, the greatest number of public comments ever submitted on a HUD regulation, which was pretty exciting.
That is exciting. I kind of remember this. I think I definitely saw like on social media at the time, like encouraging people to like join in on this. I'm
Yeah,
so that's really fantastic that you all spearheaded that effort.
we were able to do that. We co-chaired that campaign with National Center for Transgender Equality. But we really built early a very wide coalition of folks that were trying to get that message out. And it's the only major anti-LGBTQ rule that was proposed under the Trump administration that didn't go into effect. Ultimately, we defeated it in the process. And so it's something that I know for the rest of my life, I think, regardless of whatever happens in the future, I can look back on that and feel really proud of the work that our team did.
That is absolutely amazing and wonderful, and that definitely does show how important your mission is. And the second half of that question was, are there any big initiatives coming up that we should be really excited about supporting?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that come to mind. Actually, there's three right
Okay.
now that are really exciting for me personally.
Hmm.
One is that we have this awesome work happening on the ground in Los Angeles right now. So
Okay.
we've been partnering with young people with lived experience of homelessness in Los Angeles County and in the city of Los Angeles, which they are the same and they're also separate. The
Mm.
county goes much bigger than the city itself.
Hmm.
Those young people started sort of doing work in what's called the LA Emissary around 2 years ago, and this summer, all of them are going to be coming on board as new staff at TCU because we're going to be hosting their work at our organization. We've been really excited to support it for a long time, and I think one of the things that we're really thrilled to be able to get to do now is support this group of young people, very directly and with real resources around like the work that they're doing to drive systems change in the Los Angeles homelessness services sort of system, right? And so they're all coming on board. They're an amazing group of young people. They're brilliant, all of them. And it's going to be really exciting to sort of see where that work goes over the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
And then another one, and this one is a little bit less. So the LA work is very much like it's happening, but there's this big moment that we're having around it, and I think it's only going to grow from here.
Hmm.
There's also a project that we actually haven't launched yet that I really, really want to see happen sometime in
Hmm.
the next couple of years. But we just don't have the funds yet to be able to do this. So
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with like the boys state, girls state program.
Uh, go ahead and tell us a little bit more, please.
So it's this thing that like they do with high school students across the country every year that um like a kid from each school basically is nominated to go and participate in this like mock state legislature thing,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Um, historically, traditionally, this is like kind of a very visible and popular civic leadership kind of opportunity for young people, but it really specifically is something that has mostly ended up being an opportunity for young people who already have tons of opportunities, right?
Ah, gotcha.
Who really, like I'm sure earned their spots as
Hmm.
individuals, but like these aren't the same kinds of opportunities that like a lot of, in particular, LGBTQ plus young people and young
Hmm.
people of color are gonna have
Hmm.
access to
Hmm.
realistically. And so what I've wanted for a long time is for there to be something similar that is for LGBTQ plus, but maybe even really specifically drilling in on it being for like trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming young people
Hmm.
in the South
Oh
to
wow.
get
Yep.
that kind of experience for a week together, right, at a state capitol,
Mm.
learning how a bill gets drafted, what that process looks like of moving it through the legislature, how citizens or residents or constituents are able to weigh in along the way, and then be able to go back to their home state somewhere in the South with an idea of, really directly how they could drive policy change on the state level. And I think that one of the things that we've seen consistently
Hmm.
in sort of this time where state legislatures across the country, but in particular the South and the Midwest, are very successfully rolling back the rights of LGBTQ plus young people, and particularly trans youth,
Hmm.
is that, where we saw that take the most quickly politically
Hmm.
inside of the South
Mm.
were places that trans people weren't already in the building, where
Ah.
places where like trans people weren't like being included in the conversation, in the halls of power, didn't have those relationships with legislators or with other lobbyists, right? And so all of those decisions were being made essentially in a vacuum about a group of
Mm.
people that these lawmakers have no idea who trans people are, right?
Right.
And the inverse of that we saw in Louisiana, where we're now in a bad place, but we were able to hold this off for so long. And I think it was very much due to the fact that like there were a lot of people in the Louisiana state legislature when I was working there who, absolutely were not going to hesitate to vote for something that attacked the rights of trans young people.
Hmm.
However, there were a lot of people in the middle that really struggled to take that vote because they knew there was someone that they knew actually as a person in the back of the room watching them do it. And that was the difference,
Mm.
for us, I think, for a long time.
Hmm.
So that sort of like, opportunity, I think, to really get some young people comfortable with that process and then figure out how we can build some relationships, some connections for them with local organizations doing this work already so that they have a home
Hmm.
to be sort of working out of long term. That's kind of my dream. And I think that it's going to take that kind of investment, but, manyfold, right?
Right.
Beyond that for us to start to turn the tide the other way.
Right. So on that note, we did have a question that came up, which is, what advice would you give, either practical or emotional, for someone who is trying to break into local activism?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's a good
It's
question.
a very good question. I mean, my as someone who does do local work, is always like, just look around, see if you have a local LGBTQ network or
Yeah.
organization that already exists in your community, and
Yep.
like they're always looking for volunteers. And
Yeah.
even if it's just something like, stuff that I've done is just like, all right, I'm just going to direct the cars for the people who are setting up for our pride event, or I'm just going to help
Yeah.
people set up tents. Like, even just starting there is that's still helping, and that's still being a part of your local community. But, as someone who obviously has a much wider experience than I do, what's your suggestion?
I mean, someone has to do those things, right?
Yeah.
Like that isn't unimportant work. It has to happen, so someone has to do it. I think that like yeah, I think that like going into it with some, a willingness to be humble and to learn. We have this thing in community organizing that it I think there's like lots of different names for this or different visuals that go along with this, but the one that I've always sort of used is this ladder of engagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ladder of engagement is like when you have new volunteers coming in,
Mm-hmm.
you set them up with like, the maybe what the tasks were the sort of lowest barrier to entry. And if they keep coming back, right, you
Mm-hmm.
you invest more deeply, you bring them into these other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have them coming up this ladder of engagement. And that's one of the ways that we ensure that community organizing is self-sustaining, is that we're always hoping that there are going to be new folks showing up at the door who are
Mm-hmm.
willing to some work. I think, yeah, for anyone who's trying to break into local activism or figure out sort of what it looks like to get involved, I really would recommend, absolutely look for what's already there, because there's almost certainly a bunch of folks locally who've been thinking about this and been doing this work right. And you want to make sure that you're, like stepping into that with them rather than sort of like going off and doing your own thing, probably. But I would say for me, like coming from Louisiana, the other piece is around this ladder of engagement, but also just generally is like do all of it. Learn everything that you can, because I think especially if you're hoping to make a career out of advocacy, or movement work, it is so helpful to like take the time to see how all of the different pieces work and to really embed yourself in every sort of like different area. I know for me, I did years of communications work. And that was not separate from the public policy work I was doing or the lobbying. But was really about learning how to do grassroots lobbying and activate people, right? And digital activism and things like that. So like it helps to know all of it. And you may find if you do that, right, that there's one thing inside of this work that you absolutely love. And that's when things really start to come together.
Yes, digital advocacy, something that I think we're kind of an engagement. I think that's something we might be just a little familiar with.
I think we're doing that.
So, do you have a favorite personal story about your experiences with True Colors United? Like some like nice experiences you got to have thanks to being part of this organization that came from Trader Anade in our community.
Yeah. I think for me right now, what I'm thinking of is a lot of like what it's looked like for us to be able to like get to be a community in person a little bit more.
Totally understandable.
Like back on the ground, back traveling. I think, it's very hard to do this work in an isolated way. It's hard to do it without sort of like really strong relationships and a network of support. And so when I get to spend some time in person with folks on my team or folks who are doing this work on the ground or are doing some strategizing and bringing us in on that, that's always like the best. I got back on Friday of last week from a week in West Hollywood, because True Colors was invited to participate in West Hollywood Pride on June 2nd, which was really exciting. So got to go be in the parade with Cyndi Lauper, who's one of our co-founders, and really spend some time with some of the folks I was talking about who are doing this work in LA, while we opened their new office, which was really exciting. So it's things like that that really just keep me going and give me a lot of joy in being able to do this work.
Oh, that's wonderful. From Ruby in chat, I know at the beginning you mentioned international programs. Can you talk a little bit more about what y'all are doing internationally?
Yeah, so right now, like literally right now, well, no, because right now it's, I think, after midnight in Slovenia, but our senior director of international programs, Coco Wheeler, right now is in the Balkans hosting co-hosting some like convening space for LGBTQ plus rights organizations across that region of Eastern Europe, where they're coming together and really strategizing around like what does it look like for them to advance a research agenda, to be able to have more information about what youth homelessness looks like in their communities, right? To then be able to use that to drive change. And so that's really exciting. We've done quite a bit of work in I think primarily Western Europe and Central America around supporting providers and other folks in the sort of like broader homelessness system,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to better work with young people in a way that's like authentic and meaningful and actually brings them into, you know, real decision making and power in sort of driving sort of what service delivery looks like,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool. And then the other thing that I would flag there that's like it's a pretty big one for us and hopefully is going to be really taking off this year actually is that we've been working to prepare for a big research project in East Africa now for some time.
Wonderful.
And so we have these like awesome partners at an organization in Nairobi called Kenneth and Jacob's House.
Mm-hmm.
They reached out to us a few years ago when they were just sort of getting their organization set up to, you know, do some shared learning and some exchange essentially and start to figure out, you know, what would it look like for us to work together to collect data on LGBTQ homelessness in East Africa. So East Africa is certainly not the only place in the world that's like this, but what we're seeing consistently outside of the US and Canada
Mm-hmm.
is that in most of the world, there's very limited data on the prevalence or experiences of LGBTQ plus people who are unhoused. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have any quantitative data to show around like what's the prevalence of young people in Kenya who experience homelessness who are LGBTQ identified, right? And then what are they naming as the factors that may have led to that? We don't have that. And so that makes it really hard for folks like our partners at Kenneth and Jacob's House to then go to their government and ask for something different, ask for more resources, ask
Mm-hmm.
for new laws, right? Push back on anti-LGBTQ laws because they're not able to give sort of the hard facts of what the experience is in the
Mm-hmm.
community. And so we're right now preparing to launch that research project in partnership with them and some other folks that are, you know, really specifically doing this work in community in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
But long term, we're really looking at all of the region of East Africa and a handful of other countries where we want to then replicate that research once we've done it in Kenya.
Oh, that's really fantastic. I'll definitely want to see kind of how that all like pans out because as someone who you know who works local government, I absolutely understand like a lot of times if you want to do an initiative, if you want to get something, you have to have the info, you have to have the data to
Yep.
back up why this is needed. So that's really great that you're going to be helping um, sort of with that research project. Um, so, sort of like on a little bit of the other side of things, what advice would you have for someone who is worried about facing housing insecurity after coming out? The type of people who would, need some of the services that True Colors United supports.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like, oof, it's a rough one. It's a rough question because the answer is not entirely helpful or satisfying, to be totally honest, right? And so I think that, one of the things that I try to tell people about this, in particular if you're under 18 still, right? Is that it is a good idea to really gauge, like to what extent can you safely come out and retain your housing, right? And stay in your home and
Mm-hmm.
know that you'll be, relatively safe there. That's just absolutely something that I really encourage people to think a lot about before
Mm-hmm.
making that decision. Because the thing is, once you're sort of through adolescence and you're out in the world and you've got a job and some financial security that comes with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got your whole life ahead of you at that point. There's so much to look forward to. And what I experienced, and what so many people that I work with and have known throughout the years have experienced is that, after leaving home early, For me, I didn't live um, with my family of origin for most of high school. I lived with an aunt and uncle for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
other sort of things. There, it makes everything a little bit harder. Um, and so I think, there's just there's just this question. Now, if someone is concerned for their safety in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get out. It's better to get out and find support and go somewhere that you're going to be protected and be able to access some services and resources than it is to stay. It's not worth it to stay in an abusive situation ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you can stomach sort of like not maybe being able to be totally true to yourself in your family home, but knowing that there's sort of time right around the corner for when you're going to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say hold on to that sort of light at the end of the tunnel and push through because, the more set up you are for what comes next, based on sort of what your family is able to offer in that way,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it's going to be down the line to have financial security, have housing security, and know that you're set up for success.
Yeah, I can. That is really good advice, and I know I've had to give similar advice to that to friends of mine. So I absolutely agree there. Um, got another question from our Twitch chat from Tepes Mask. What would your advice be for someone who might not be able to have might have trouble having like the time to be active, but still wishes to help? Like what kind of like small things can we do to help like different advocacy organizations?
I think that if time and capacity is an issue,
Hmm.
I think that like sometimes where all of this gets really hard is just in that there's so much, right?
Right.
There's like we're constantly having, I get on my phone and I get on Instagram, right? And there
Hmm.
are like 19,000 really important causes where folks are trying to ask through content delivery, to me and thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of other people to take some sort of action. And that's very overwhelming. And I think if
Mm.
you have limited capacity for that, I can see where that really shuts people down and just not knowing like what am I supposed to be doing, right? What is the thing to lock in on? And so what I would suggest to folks who are in that situation or that position is you got to just pick something,
Hmm.
one thing.
One thing.
Don't like, stay laser focused on one thing. Whatever is most important to you, most in your heart today, right?
Hmm.
And it can change down the line, right? Or maybe your capacity will grow and you'll be able to add more to that. But if you know that you've made a commitment to, you know, like, okay, whenever this one organization posts something asking us to call our member of Congress, I'm going to do it, right?
Right.
If you've committed to just the one thing,
Hmm.
then it can be a little bit less overwhelming to be having to filter the rest of it out instead of, oh, should I do this? Oh, should I do that? They're asking me to come phone bank at this campaign, et cetera, right? So that's what I would suggest is just, that pick something. It doesn't have to be the most, exciting thing even. It can just be something that you can do.
That's no, that's really great advice. Then of course I'm someone who but doing like I said like events like this, which are for sometimes when you're a part of a speedrunning marathon, you might only just do like one small part of it, but
Right.
you could then use that to kind of build up, and just sort of using our event as like an example of like a more, I guess, slightly unorthodox method of advocacy and activism, but it's still, we're still doing work even while we're having fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and on that sort of lighter note, do you have a personal history with video games? And if so, what are your favorites?
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, so I was born in 1991,
Mm-hmm.
so perfectly aged for the release of PlayStation. But
Yes.
also like Game Boy Color, right?
Oh
So those
yeah.
were like those were the two places that I spent my childhood. I loved Spyro the Dragon.
Ooh,
I
good
still love it
choice. Good
actually.
good
I have
choice.
it. I have it on our PS4. So I still play the like restored version all the way through over and over again. Probably once a year I play it all the way through and have the best time. I loved Pokemon. I
Hmm.
still play Pokemon Go. But I had, I still get the Switch games when they come out, but like on Game Boy, every release I was like ready for Pokemon
Oh.
Gold or whatever it might
Hmm.
be. And then, these days, I actually probably watch a lot more video games than I play.
Oh, that's fine. That's totally fun. That's what
Yeah.
streamers are here
I
for.
appreciate I appreciate the work that y'all do and the content that y'all produce. I know, in my husband is a like longtime Yogscast fan,
Hmm.
so we see a lot of like Trouble in Terrorist Town, a lot of like, oh gosh, was it called Plates Up? That video game that had a real big moment last year with the diners.
So,
Um, or Plated maybe.
mm,
And then there's one right now that I wish I could tell you what it's called, and maybe some people who are watching will know what I'm talking about.
okay.
But it's a game that it feels like it's set kind of in like a Honey I Shrunk the Kids backyard land.
Oh, it takes two.
Maybe are they
That
like
they're
like
like dolls. It's a husband and a wife, and they're like trying to like get over like wanting to separate. Is that it, or is it something else?
no,
Okay,
no,
okay.
it's like
Uh,
a
is it
handful of
grounded?
different what?
Grounded is what chat is suggesting.
Yeah, do they fight bugs in that?
Unfortunately, I don't know this game, so I'm hoping that chat knows this game.
I think that might be it. I think
Okay.
that might be it.
Okay. Barricale says yes.
I
So,
love watching that game. For whatever reason, I find it so satisfying. The art is beautiful. Yeah, it's so much fun.
oh, good. Chat does want to know what is your favorite Pokemon?
Oh, it's Vulpix. I have a Vulpix tattoo actually on the back of my left calf.
That is fantastic. I admit, as someone else who came of age in that exact same like time period. I am also someone whose favorite Pokemon is a Gen 1, and my favorite is Meowth. Only
Oh, it's such a good one.
slightly influenced by the television series, but I always really loved Meowth. And then I am well known for being an RPG nerd. I can definitely make the joke that I'm always like within like distance. There you go, get Sephiroth there.
I love it. I love it.
But no, that's really um, great that you also have a personal experience with video games, and it's always fun for me trying to explain what I do to people who maybe don't quite
Yeah.
have that experience. Usually the way I explain it to people is like, it's like a telethon but with video games is kind of how I try to explain it. But I always try to emphasize that it's really wonderful that within the gaming community there is this very strong coalition of folks who love their games, who love celebrating their games, and who love putting that out into the world as a force for good. So
Yeah.
it's been really wonderful to um, to have the chance to take that love and passion of video games and put it forward. All right, we maybe have time for maybe like two more like quick
Yeah.
fun questions. Okay, from Evil Things in Chat, is cereal soup and why? We were talking food earlier, but is cereal a soup?
Mm-mm.
This is good. This is my kind of brand of questions. I joke that if you invite me onto something, eventually it will devolve into congratulations, you're at Scala sleepover. Here's your 2 a.m. like question of like, is cereal soup?
I like to think of this. I like to think of these questions in the context of like if aliens were here and were just like very recently introduced to the concept of soup and somebody handed them a bowl of cereal, right? Would they get soup? I think the answer might be no, because if you're early to soup, then you might not know about cold soup yet, right? Like
That's
that's
true.
kind of fringe. It's kind of
I
fringe in the soup world.
that is true.
Um,
Cold soup is a little. I think I did one of those sort of like joking food like matrices, uh, where it's like like does X count as like a milkshake? And mainly I did the joke just to be like the radical milkshake anarchy is that broccoli cheddar soup is a milkshake.
kind of is. It kind of is.
All right, and one additional silly question. I see you have a fabulous bookshelf on there. Do you have anything on there that you would recommend for us to read that you can pull off that bookshelf behind you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fabulous.
Okay, let's see. All right. If you want to be just like, if you haven't read it yet, if you've been holding out and you want to just be deeply frustrated for years while he finishes the third one, I have this signed copy of The Name of the Wind here. It's a beautiful edition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love it. Pretty great book for just like your general sort of like fantasy fan, right?
Okay.
For anyone who hasn't dug in. I held out for years and refused to read it because I was like seeing all of the internet buzz about the third one just being not on time. So but then I eventually gave in, and I really liked it. And then if you're looking for something, that's not the right one. If you're looking for something more in the vein of like queer lit, right? Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. Dorothy Allison is my like writing hero. Everything she's ever published, I'm deeply moved by. But it's a sort of semi-autobiographical novel about her childhood growing up in Appalachia as in girlhood, but then also as a young queer woman, and what that experience was. So it's really just a kind of devastating story that's beautifully told. But that's Southern queer lit for you.
That does sound like Southern queer lit for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't have them on hand. I'll give two in turn. And this also is out there for you, chat. Video Games Have Always Been Queer by Bo Ruberg is a really fantastic series of essays about doing close queer readings of video games, and it's worth it just for the first chapter, which is all about how Pong is queer. It's worth it. Trust me. It's such a fun way to sell that book, though. It's just like, yeah, we're going to talk about how Pong is queer, and it's great. I
love that. I cannot wait to give that a try.
And then, because I've been obsessed with it, if you want a interesting queer fantasy experience, I've been reading Heaven Official's Blessing, which is a Chinese queer fantasy novel series.
Awesome.
Which all I'm gonna say is just read it for my man Hua Chung. He's the best. 800-year-old immortal ghost king would absolutely be the resident charismatic antagonist in any other series. Then this one, he's the love interest, and it's so fun.
That's a good twist.
All right, one last question. What's your favorite Mardi Gras candy?
My favorite Mardi Gras candy?
Yes.
Ooh. I don't think it counts as a candy, but I love a banana moon pie.
Ooh.
And they still throw moon pies from the floats during Mardi Gras, I think.
Now you just make me want moon pies as someone who has lived in the South. The thing is, I'm not a banana person.
You can get them online. Well, they've got new flavors now. I think there's a salted caramel now. It used to just be like vanilla, chocolate, or banana, but there's like they're doing it. They're doing stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we got to end on a nice, positive, fun note. But Dylan, thank you again so much for taking your time out to come and talk to us. Can you tell us what different social media platforms we can follow True Colors United on so we can keep up to date with y'all's work?
Absolutely. Yes. So we're on Instagram
Hmm.
at True Colors United. That's
Hmm.
our handle. We're also on Facebook, or we're calling it Meta, right?
Whatever.
I don't know. We left Twitter politically, decided to do
Yeah,
that.
we did the same.
But we're also on TikTok, but honestly our TikTok is like we're TikTok babies still.
Hmm.
So please, yeah, do go give us a follow, but also don't expect daily content from us yet. We're working our way up to it. And then yeah, our website is truecolorsunited.org. So, the other thing besides social that I can recommend is like if folks scroll down on our
Hmm.
homepage, you can sign up for our email list as well. I know you already get too many emails. I respect it, but it's an option.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Now, for everyone watching, our pre-show does not stop here. What we have coming up next is we're going to be doing a series of first playthrough races where people who have never seen, never played a game have to see how far they can get within the time limit, which is very exciting. So we are going to have up first, we're going to have Miki no Tokyo Disneyland Daiboken. That's gonna be first. Then we're gonna do Neon Beats, and then finally Plock. So, which are all games that you'll see run at a way more competent level later on in the marathon. But we thought this would be a really fun way to get our community involved, get to have a lot of really good fun, and we have a absolutely fabulous group. We're going to have Trader Anade being our host, and we're going to have Flannel Cat and Barricale and Demarine and Neon Gray all taking turns at commentary. So it's going to be a really fun time. So please stay tuned. And Dylan, thank you once more for the interview. We so appreciate it, and we're so looking forward to spending this weekend raising money for True Colors United.
Thank you so much for y'all's support and happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride!
All right.